Stacey, how are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you, Dom?
I'm good. I'm good. So great to be back on the phone with you after our pre-interview and that long conversation we already had.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I didn't realize there was so much around drug addiction and substance abuse and mental health. Ah,
I could talk for days.
well, okay. Let's see if we can do it in 45 minutes or so.
I think we can get it done.
Yeah. One of the things that's interesting, and we'll get to your intro in a moment, but I put out
Sure.
just a intro piece to let people know that I was going to be having you as a guest on the show. And I've never had this kind of response, especially for something non-technical,
Okay.
ever before. And I don't think even I understood the impact of addictions in the workplace until I got the feedback from listeners.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you're here. I'm really glad you're here. Can you tell us who you are and what you do in this big wide world we live in?
Okay. My name is Stacey Henson. I'm a licensed clinical social worker by training. I've been a clinician for almost 25 years, but now I'm in a role where I do outreach in the community. I work with Advanced Recovery Systems, which is a parent company to what we call the Recovery Village. And we have 9 treatment centers throughout the country. I live in Florida, so 4 of the facilities are in Florida. All of our facilities are primary addiction. We do detox, residential, partial hospitalization, intensive outpatient, and we offer sober living. So we offer the full spectrum of services to anybody that has a primary addiction. Again, we have 3 adult facilities in Florida, but we also have an adolescent facility. So when you talk about how pervasive addiction is throughout systems in general, I mean, it even reaches into the adolescent population as well. So we have a specialty facility for that. But we have facilities throughout the country. So we have a firefighter facility in Maryland.
Oh,
We
wow.
have one. Yeah, it's fantastic. We have a facility in Columbus, Ohio, one in Palmer Lake, Colorado, and one in Ridgefield, Washington. And we have a new one opening in Cherry Hill as soon as COVID allows us to open it. So it's sitting there beautiful and ready to go.
Some of the people listening to this podcast might be working on that construction project right now. So
That's possible. Absolutely.
good. Well, as I said, you're talking to construction business owners all throughout, for sure in North America, but we also have in the English speaking world who are in construction and construction trades.
Okay.
So the reason I found you, or why I went looking for an expert like yourself, is I was working with a client, happens to be a woodworker, and one of his installers, a senior guy on his team, a trusted guy. And you may hear these stories all the time, Stacey, but for us, it's when you've got a small crew, you know everybody. You have lunch with them. You know when their truck has got a problem. You know everything, right?
Right.
But anyways, this gentleman went through a divorce, as so happens. And then things started going missing from clients' houses.
Oh, wow.
And so the first time, my client said, "Oh, wow, that's weird. So-and-so would, I don't know how that happened." The second time, well, that's weird. And by the third and fourth time, a pattern started to emerge. And so, of course, this gentleman never said to the owner, "I'm using meth," but, it's a small community. Everybody in the company knows each other, and that's how it came out. So that's how this topic hit the table. And I'm sure that the business owners listening here are in the same place I am. First, I don't know how to talk about it. I'm a dum-dum. I know I'm going to say something wrong today. I apologize. But from my perspective as an owner, I don't want to hire somebody who has an addiction problem only because I've got enough problems to deal with.
Sure.
Second, I'm a good guy. And if somebody on my team does have a problem, I need to know what to do.
Absolutely.
Completely negates the first thing I said, but if you understand what I mean.
I gotcha. Yeah, understood.
So can we start with what are the signs of addiction? Like, how do I know when somebody applies to work for me or shows up first day on the job? What are some clues that we've got somebody with an addiction problem?
Well, I think you're looking at, there's a variety of things you're going to look for, Dom. And so when you look at one of the things you said is that behavior changes are notable. That's one of the biggest things. If you know somebody, they got referred by somebody, you could check the resource or the references of that person and say, "Hey, have you ever noticed any behavior issues?" I mean, I think just checking out references is a huge piece because you're going to be able to get a better idea of that pattern of behavior, like you were talking about your woodworking clients. So, but when we look at addiction, at first glance, somebody in an interview, you're going to look for behavioral symptoms, right? That's all you're going to see.
Right.
So you're going to look for things like, are there any noticeable mood swings? Are they agitated or antsy? You know, a lot of people are fidgety, but does it seem excessive? You know, I mean, I tap my foot or play with my phone or talk with my hands, you know, but some of that is just normative behavior. Sometimes people are just anxious when they do interviews. But if they aren't, you'll notice that there might be, you know, some odd behaviors. You know, are they paranoid? Are they looking around? Are they having trouble following the conversation? Do they lose track of what you're saying? I think that when we look at it, sometimes there's sweating that's involved if they're actively using, whether that's a detox piece or there's an intense craving going on. When we look at meth specifically, you look for, you know, what they call is, I guess it's tactile hallucinations, but they have this feeling like bugs are crawling, and that may be during a detox phase, or it may be after recent heavy use. So you're going to see that. And that's where, I guess the other piece that you'll see besides the behavior is the potential of physical signs, right? So the picking that you see, you may see sores on the skin.
So, sorry, Stacey, what is picking?
Yeah. Picking, like picking at your skin.
Oh.
Because they feel like there's bugs crawling on them.
Oh. Okay.
So it can get to the point where they actually cause sores.
So if we see somebody who shows up and they've got, for people who are listening to the audio, Stacey's on video, so she was picking at her arm.
Oh yeah, sorry.
And all the time too. But if there's active little scabs or sores on them or on their face, I guess.
Yeah, it can be there as well.
Wow.
And so the other piece is, and I don't know if you've heard of it, and it's not a nice thing to say, but we talk about meth mouth. So a lot of people, there's breakdown in their dental work or their oral hygiene. So a lot of damaged teeth, whether that's cracking or a lot of decay, sometimes loss of teeth can be a significant, I guess, deviation from how most people would present. I mean, some people just have dental issues, so you can't just assume that that's the issue. But, you know, if you're looking at putting a puzzle together kind of thinking.
Yeah.
But people who are active in an addiction usually present just a little bit more disheveled. Not always, you know, some people have a good way of being kind of a, you know, the phrase we always hear, like a functioning alcoholic or a functioning addict.
Right.
People learn how to balance that. When I was in private practice, I worked with a young man who was on Suboxone because he had a heroin addiction. But he drove a Bobcat for a construction company. But he would balance his usage and not take a Suboxone when he wanted to use heroin. And so he was actively using and still held a job with a really scary big piece of equipment, you know? And so looking at how people learn how to function with it, and it is possible. How long they can do that is the question.
Right. Do they, I mean, I don't want to take away the humanity of it because these are still people, but is one of the symptoms a loss of track of time? Like they're showing up late, or they're saying, no, it's okay, I'm going to work all day. And suddenly they've got crazy energy. And
well, if we're looking past the interview and you're trying to look at what are patterns, absolutely. I think when you look at somebody, particularly with meth, people go on binges often and they don't sleep for days. And then they have to catch up and they sleep for days. So you may see some of that, oh, sorry, I'm late, or they're consistently calling in either late or sick. I think that would be a sign of any addiction, potentially. Right. Or even, we could even say any mental health issue, because somebody that's severely depressed maybe just can't get out of bed. So any consistency in calling off or being late, you need to look at maybe what's behind that and have some questions, you know, surrounding that.
My mind right now, there's so many directions I'm thinking of questions.
Well, and so let me kind of elaborate a little bit more on, you know, the people that you employ. I mean, when you look at the questions, you want to look at work history, right? I mean, same things you're going to look at regardless when you're doing an interview. You want references, you want to know, you know, but if you notice anything that's off, you can ask. You say, hey, I just noticed you seem to be a little uncomfortable today. Is everything okay? I mean, it's direct, it's compassionate, because you notice that they seem a little awkward for whatever reason. And somebody who's just anxious is going to say, oh no, I just really need this job, so I'm nervous, right?
Right.
So I think to just ask the questions, just find what's a comfortable phrase to use in an interview. And if you interview people on a regular basis, you know what the regular responses are.
That's right. You know what the normal type of answer is.
Exactly.
And it's rampant is that there's a shortage of good labor. It has been,
I'm sure,
years. And so at times as owners, we're like, oh my God, this warm body can do that job. And we might even know we're making the wrong call.
Yeah.
Make the wrong call. And now this person's on the team.
Right.
That makes it okay for other people to maybe take their recreational use in another direction. And that gets to be problematic as well.
Yeah. But I want to, think about the piece where we talk about, what do you see on the job? What are the symptoms or the I don't know, lack of a better word, but how do you recognize something impacting job? And obviously the call offs or the being late or having to leave early are all signs. Frequent trips to the bathroom. As trite as that may sound, if somebody is trying to use throughout the day, they're going to need a private place to do that.
Oh, so if they're going to the porta potty a lot.
Mm-hmm. Or they take an extended lunch or their behavior changes as people. If you have a good team of people that you're used to working with, like the gentleman you were talking about, he knew his guy. So he knew something was off, but he wasn't sure what, right?
I think.
And so I mean, as a clinician, I always trust my gut. I feel like I have a good sense about people. And if something's different, again, I'm a clinician, I'm comfortable just being very, very direct. But I think that that's really the best way to go about it. Find a way, find a question, find a way to phrase it that is comfortable for you and fits within the realm of your company. I mean, if there's an HR department, have the conversation with HR. If there isn't an HR department, and there's a partner or the lead, you have that conversation about, how do we want to handle this consistently? Have a plan for anybody, not just the one-off that happened to show up today. What are we going to do moving forward? So how do we want, do we want to have that initial, hey, you know what, guys? And I say that because I make an assumption that most of them are male, and that's not always true. Have the conversation, have a team meeting. Say, this is something we're really concerned about, and we're going to start paying attention.
Well, and as a matter of fact, OSHA standards or workplace standards, depending on the country, are that you have team meetings. And there's different size companies listening to this show. Some are 2-man crews, some are one.
Okay. Right.
Or 80-man crews. And I say man,
okay,
meaning workforce.
People.
And so some may not have HR departments, but we all should be having the tailgate talk. What are we doing to the expectations? Those are the places to bring up issues like, I expect everybody to be on time. On time is part of the job. If you're not on time, you're not on the job. That's part of it. And so that's applying it equally to everybody. That also takes away just the kid who's, I say a kid, but not used to having a job and thinks they can just sleep in because they've always slept in. Well, that doesn't cut it as much as somebody who has a substance issue and is late because they were binging, I guess. Just the rule, on time is on time. And to be on my team, it means we show up on time. We're professionals.
Yes.
So you can there. That's the very minimum we can all do and have that conversation.
Yeah. Well, and I think to even extrapolate from that, you're on time is part of it, but then you do your job, right? You meet the expectations of the role. And sometimes that's what we see with people that are using, is that their productivity changes, their ability to focus changes. Maybe they're making more mistakes or they're missing things. Again, looking for little things that just seem a little bit off. Maybe it's a new person on the team and they haven't worked in this particular arena or this type of a job before. Okay, well, you give them that learning curve piece. But once they've been taught everything, if they aren't able to hold up, even if they're not using, you'd still have the conversation, right? Like, what do we need to do to get you up to standard? Because we need these things to meet our contract or meet the timeline or whatever. And if we're having to redo things, so still having those conversations. So workplace issues is obviously an easy screening piece. What do you see that's changed? What we also can see at the workplace is, I guess mood swings is the best way to put it. Either, get very easily angered. Maybe they're a little bit aggressive towards other teammates. They don't take, some of us don't like criticism. Some of us can take it, with a grain of salt. But if you see things flaring, that can also be indicative of something going on. And it could be mental health. It could just be extra stress. It doesn't have to be substances.
Right.
But to have that high and low in a constrained amount of time is pretty significant.
So one of the things that contractors are known for is being very blunt and straightforward.
I love it.
But sometimes a delicate conversation is called for. So
Okay.
having a conversation when you've got a crew of 5 people in front of you and saying, hey, Bob, and then making what could be considered an accusation, that can be difficult. And it could be if he's having a bad day or Bob's going through his own personal issues without substances. Now Bob's, you might lose Bob. So my here, Stacey, is how do I enter into a delicate conversation with somebody? Do I go to pull them into a private place on the site? What do you do to enter into a delicate conversation?
Well, again, I think that it's going to be important that you have an idea of what you want to say before you go into it. Have it written down so you don't get derailed by the person's reaction. And just have a standard set of questions so it doesn't seem to feel like that person's getting singled out necessarily. But yeah, I think you absolutely pull them aside. You don't want to call them out in front of the team because most people are going to go into denial or they're going to get angry and storm off, right? Nobody likes to have the finger pointed at them. That doesn't feel good to anybody, especially if they're struggling with something additional that nobody else is privy to. So I think you do bring them in. And if, again, depending upon how well you know the person, you can just say, what's going on? I know something's different. This is what I'm seeing. Can you help me understand what's going on? So I think if you kind of appeal to that more compassionate side, which is easy for me as a therapist, but that's why I think you should have this written down prior to going in. You have an idea of what you want to address. What specific things have you seen? Because often if somebody's trying to cover something up, they're going to have a rebuttal for everything you say.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Good.
Yeah. And so you want to have, well, you know what? I saw this the other day, or if there's something notable that day, look, you don't look like you normally do. Your hair's a mess. Your eyes are dilated. You're slurring your speech, whatever, right? Whatever things you see in the moment. But to just try to, and put it out there. Again, every business place is going to be different. Maybe a drug test is warranted. Most workplaces, if there's an injury, they drug test you on the spot. It doesn't matter, right? I mean, injuries usually prompt that. Mm-hmm. Is there a methodology in place already that if there's suspected substance use that you request a drug screen? They can decline it, but usually that means they lose their job. Yeah. So what are the hurdles? What do you have in place? And then if there's that connection, I think that makes that conversation easier in the sense that it feels more heartfelt. It's not just me trying to get rid of another employee because I have one man too many on this team, right? So I really think it can still be a very direct conversation, but it can be, help me understand what's going on.
Yeah.
And they don't have to give the details. Like your friend, I just went through a divorce and I'm really struggling. Well, yeah, but there seems to be more to that.
Yeah, and digging into, and unfortunately in that situation, there was theft from clients' homes.
Absolutely.
So devastating to the company.
Yeah.
Well,
and that leads perfectly, Dom, to one of the other pieces to pay attention to. If there's any legal issues, right? It may be something that you see in the work site, things being stolen. But if somebody comes in and say, hey man, I got to go to court. I've got this other thing going on. Anything that's significantly impacting your life could affect legally, right? It doesn't have to be a DUI. It could be they stole something from somewhere else. Maybe their finances are really struggling and they are being taken to court over not paying rent.
Right.
Or, a bankruptcy or a foreclosure on a home. There's a lot of different things that can have legal impact that you may see trickling into the workplace because they have to be gone to attend to meet with an attorney or go to court.
Yeah. There's so many implications of this. You know, I was speaking at a conference before COVID when we were allowed to meet and have
Right.
conferences.
Yeah.
And one of the final speakers spoke about insurance, which is usually such an exciting, I'm shaking my head, not very.
Yeah.
But the conversation was very specific around company vehicle usage and
Okay.
texting and driving, which is not substance abuse, but also drinking and driving during the job, which I would think that's a no-go. You don't drink during the day, but
you would think so.
You would think so. But the requirement for owners to put stickers inside the vehicle to say, do not drink and drive, do not text and drive, right on the steering wheel, right on the dashboard.
Wow.
People, as the owner, taking the responsibility, because of course, once lawyers get a hold of it, it doesn't become the employee was drinking. It becomes the employer didn't tell me. Nobody told me I wasn't supposed to drink at work or drugs or et cetera, et cetera. So we have a responsibility as well. When you mentioned legal, my mind fired off in that direction is that, geez, we have to go beyond as owners. We've got to take that step of, yes, we've got to babysit and put a sticker in the truck that says, no drug use while driving, no drug use at work, no drinking at work. Craziness.
It is, because it seems as if that would just be an expectation or the norm. But I mean, I get the insurance loophole, if you want to call it that if it isn't clearly written down somewhere that they can say, oh, well, you didn't, it wasn't clear. Yeah. So, yeah.
Let's go to the other victim in this, if you will, because we've talked about the person who has a substance issue or the person that is struggling with mental health and how we're going to deal with that. What about the person that's not? And so this, Stacey, this is where it comes into my mind. It's a personal situation. I have a large family. I have a cousin who has a substance abuse issue, and then his brother doesn't. And I know, obviously they're my cousins. I know them well. But I found out that my other cousin, the one without the substance abuse issue, was in a support group himself.
Yes.
And in this conversation, we've been talking about the person who has the substance abuse issue. But what about the person who doesn't, who's trying to deal with this, whether it's in the family, at work? Where's the support for the non-user or the non-sufferer of mental health?
So somebody who's a part of that system. Yeah. There's a ton of resources out there, Dom, and I think that that's one of the things. I mean, actually, that's a benefit I think that's come from COVID, is that there's a lot more accessibility with everything virtual as well. So, you know, if you have, I mean, one of the first things I do when I get a referral, if I'm talking to the family, once the patient's admitted, my first question to them is, are you taking care of you? How are you connected to the supports available? So those supports could be as simple as going to an outpatient therapist, you know, and just going to therapy appointments to try to help understand what the impact of having addiction in your life, even if it's not yours, right? It still affects us all. So how does that impact our day-to-day, the stress levels, all of those things? And how long has it been stressing that person out? There are support groups, sometimes within private practices, sometimes within the community. We have obviously AA, NA, CA for alcohol, narcotics, and cocaine. Well, they have their partner groups. So we have Al-Anon for family members of people who struggle with alcoholism, Narcanon for Narcotics Anonymous, and those people, and I don't know how they say that one for CA, but Cocaine Anonymous, and they have a partner for that as well. So those are similar 12-step groups to what the substance abuser would attend, but it allows them to go and meet with other people who are struggling with the same thing. You know, whether it's a loved one, it's a family member, it's somebody that you can go, oh my gosh, I totally understand that. And there's just this coming together of support in a way that individually we don't always find.
So I have a question, and if I have the question, I think somebody else might as well. So let's use Alcoholics Anonymous as the example. So if I'm an alcoholic, I can go to Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yes.
If I'm a family member of that alcoholic, I can go to Al-Anon?
Yes.
Okay.
You could also go to AA, the Alcoholics Anonymous as well. But it's going to be, but most of the family members I refer to Al-Anon. It's just getting into that realm where you can have those conversations.
And that group is all people who are trying to support somebody who's alcoholic or narcotic.
Correct. Yeah.
And does my let's just make a really simple example here. So my brother's, this is not the case. Anybody listening who knows my brother, I'm just making it up. But let's say my brother's an alcoholic. If he doesn't go into Alcoholics Anonymous, can I still go into Al-Anon?
Absolutely.
Oh, I can. Okay.
Yes.
So
yep. Because it is about what you need. Because your brother may not have identified that he needs help.
Brother's going to hate me right now for using him as an example, but
sorry, Dom's brother. But looking at that, right? I mean, the substance user doesn't always realize or isn't always willing to get the help, but the family members may need it anyway.
Mm.
So absolutely. I mean, I think it's a great resource. It can also allow people to get connected with other treatment providers to help them know what's the next step. It can be really, really tricky to navigate that. And so I think the more supports and the more resources you have, the better off you are.
It's, when I was young, I thought I was so smart. I knew everything. And
we all did.
And the older I get, the less I realize I know. I mean, it's just so many cracks and crevices and everything, but the ability for the mind, like our mind is the strongest muscle in our body. And for business owners, our mind has to be firing all the time. So anything that's detracting us from trying to run the business and be a good parent and all of the other things that go along with it, we have to, I think we have to go and deal with that, right? Because how we think about the world is how we react and act with the world. And if I see things negatively, if I'm always suspecting somebody's using, or like if that person's an alcoholic or using meth, everybody is. Well, that's not a healthy way to look at the world either. So maybe now I need to go fix myself.
Well, and you just gave like the perfect example of what I usually use when I talk about cognitive behavioral therapy, which is one of the evidence-based treatments that we use with addiction. But we also use it with depression and anxiety and anything, because we look at how do we think about things, and it determines how we feel and then how we behave. So the example I always give is you and I are driving down the road right next to each other, Dom. Somebody cuts both of us off and we both slam on our brakes. What's your reaction?
Well, I mean, I would like to keep it polite because you're a lady, but I'd probably use some sign language.
Okay. So you would get angry.
I would get angry.
Okay. What would the thought be, though, that would prompt the anger?
How could that person do this to me?
Okay. And my reaction might be, I'm so glad I didn't get hit. And so I would feel a sense of relief. And your thought of how could they do this to me would prompt an anger response. So just the difference in our thought is going to determine how we feel. We're both going to have an adrenaline rush, right? Because that's so frightening to have that happen. You got to slam on your brakes, avoid an accident. But mine is going to be, and yours is going to be like, you're going to amp up.
Yeah. I feel like I've shared too much.
That's all right. But it's the perfect example, right? Like there's how we think about things definitely determines how we feel, and then that will determine how we behave.
That's right. They lead to my actions and reactions. And this is probably the same in the workplace as well. If
I believe so, yeah.
Somebody with a substance abuse addiction and I take it as a personal slight, I'm going to act and react in a different way than, and you're a more caring person, as we can tell by your chosen profession. You're going to approach it in a different way than I am. So maybe, maybe I need what do they call it? A checkup from the neck up. How am I, am I putting off the vibe that my people can't talk to me?
Yeah, sure.
Right. Or they know that this is the way I treated Bob. Am I going to treat George the same? And
right.
It's so delicate.
It is. And that's what I was saying, like having this plan or this presentation or however you're going to do it, and just know that you're going to handle everybody the same. Right. And the bigger the company, those policies and procedures are already in place. But if you just have a small crew, you still need to have that conversation. And this is what we need to do. This is the new way we're going to look at things. Because I think if everybody knows it's going to be the same, people are not going to feel as defensive. They're not going to feel as slighted. But the reality is there may be some attrition also. If policies change and say, we're going to start asking these harder questions, or we're going to start doing random drug screens, or, however that wants to be handled.
Yeah, this is where it gets difficult. And I've often said, if somebody wanted to make a really good TV show, they should do it about business coaching, because the stuff we see is good TV. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Especially
Sure.
with family businesses. So imagine a family business, and imagine, because I don't have to imagine, but imagine one of those family members has a substance issue.
Yeah.
And everybody knows it, but you can't do anything about it because their name's on the sign outside. And then you treat everybody else in the company differently. Like if somebody in the company has a substance issue and you go and get rid of them or treat them poorly, whatever else. Right. But we all know that Freddie in head office has got a substance issue and we all just ignore it. It has to be applied consistently. I learned something from some rancher friends. Ranchers always have the greatest way of talking. Ranchers and cowboys, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and so they said, Dom, if you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything.
Yeah, I've heard that. I like that.
Really? Well, they say it so well. I don't even want to do the drawl.
No, I know what you mean. It's like this smooth little piece to it.
Yeah. But it's stood by me so long, especially in management, is that I have to stand for something as a business owner. Mm-hmm. And so I have to choose what kind of company we're going to be. We're going to be a positive company who takes responsibility, who believes in ownership for our actions, who has a vision for something better, whatever it is. And we're here to do great. Right. That's a different company than a company that says we're going to place blame. We're going to make excuses. We're going to allow negativity. We're going to allow denial and lying, and we're going to always blame somebody else. That's a totally different company.
Yes. And
I don't want to be part of that company. So I have to apply that rule, to your point, Stacey, consistently to everybody.
Right. Well, and what you're talking about, that's an example of enabling, right? We know Johnny has a problem, but everybody just picks up the slack so that things can pretend to be normal. And enabling is part of it. There's a lot of really great resources out there, a lot of great books. There's all sorts of ways to address those problems within the system. And it can be a business system. It can be a family system. There's interventionists out there that can help address the substance issue head on. And I think kind of circling back to our conversation about, well, what do I do if I feel like one of my employees has an issue? I think it's important to have some resources around.
Right.
So whether that's you download the list of AA groups in the area, or you make sure if there's insurance provided, they have the insurance information to reach out and find out about a therapist or treatment centers. I don't know. My company, we have outreach providers throughout the country. In Florida, we have a ton. I cover the Bay Area down here. And so part of that is reach out to me. Let me know what you need, and I will help you find it, even if it isn't with one of our facilities.
Yeah. Do you know that's how I found you? Because I went to do my research after this installer situation. Mm-hmm. My client was pretty upset.
I'm sure, understandably.
It felt like his trust had been, like, how can I hire somebody else? The trust is gone, right? And so, right. Your website has a ton of free stuff. I found you through your free stuff.
Free stuff is great. Everybody likes it.
Yeah, but there was other addictions in there as well. So would you mind telling us the website again?
Sure. It's called, it's therecoveryvillage.com.
Therecoveryvillage.com. Yeah, that's where, and there's just pull down menus, and that's where all of
it is. It's almost overwhelming. There's so much information, but there's a search bar up there as well. So if you need to narrow it down, whether you're looking for a facility or a specific substance, like with the meth piece, like you said, you found that there. We have a number of links on that website that specifically talk about symptoms of meth use, withdrawal symptoms, all of those. And they have a really good breakdown on that information. Yeah. And you can also link to all of our facilities. You can do virtual tours of the facilities if you want to see what they look like. You can access all the business development team, which I'm a part of, and our bios are all listed on there as well.
Yeah. Have you ever had the type of conversation? Would you be open if a family business called you and said, the situation Dom just talked about is living in our company. We've got 3 family members in the head office. One of them is dealing with an issue. Is that the kind of conversation people talk to you about?
Absolutely.
Oh, how would we find you in this great big world, Stacey?
Well, I'm, on the website, I'm listed there for the Recovery Village. I'm on LinkedIn. So you can just look up my name. Or if people want to reach out directly, you can give them my cell phone. It's 407-821-2008. I'm available not 24 hours a day, but I'm available 7 days a week. Happy to answer any. What?
That's a sign of compulsive behavior if somebody calls you at 2 a.m.
You'd be surprised. I wake up to messages or texts often. So, but I put my phone out of my room and it is in a different part of the house every night. So I'm very good about keeping good boundaries about work in that regard. But no, again, I think as a clinician, I'm very comfortable having those conversations, even if they're uncomfortable. I will be able to ask some questions that will kind of draw out some more information, and whether that's with the family or with the identified patient at the time, happy to have any conversations that would be helpful.
Yeah.
I really feel like, it seems kind of cheesy, but I feel like my goal in my job is just to have people get to the resources that are best for them. And that, like I said, that isn't always with our resources. I probably refer 50% of the calls I get to other treatment facilities or treatment providers. Whether that's based upon insurance or cost or location or a myriad of other things. The goal is to get people connected to the support that they need that's going to help them get their life back on track.
And to that end, anybody listening to this show that thinks somebody else should listen to this show so you can hear what Stacey has to say, please share this episode.
Absolutely.
Either way, to open an awkward conversation and just say, hey, you should listen to this and get it started there. This is a really critical issue, and the more I'm talking to you, the more I realize that it's like a spider web. There's shooting off in 100 directions. So I want to repeat your contact info for anybody that needs you. This is Stacey Henson, Henson, and you're on LinkedIn. You're on the website. The website is therecoveryvillage.com.
Correct.
Your phone number is 407-821-2008.
Correct.
Folks, let's limit it to texting. Don't bug Stacey until you text her first. And
oh, you can call, and if I'm available, I will answer. I'm not worried about that. That's my job.
Okay, you're so nice. We need more nice people in the world.
Thank you, Dom.
Yeah, and then there's lots of free downloads on your website too.
Yeah, we have a ton of stuff. One of the things we're actually working on having some accessibility for employers specifically, that will have some perks for their employees. So that should be coming out in the last quarter of the year, we're hoping. But one of the things we've also launched, we have telehealth available. So that's accessible. People can do it from home, which I think is huge. But we also have something called the Recovery app. I think it's the Recovery Room app. And it's where you can set up your own recovery meeting virtually as well. And so that's a really cool thing that we just added since COVID. So again, as frustrating as COVID has been for so many reasons, I think as far as mental health and addiction treatment goes, I think there's been a lot of branching out and accessibility. Even the 12-step groups, AA, are virtual now.
Yeah.
So people have accessibility where maybe they haven't been able to have it before.
Yeah, I suppose if it's virtual, you can just go hop in your vehicle and make the phone call. Maybe it's a little less intimidating than going to a church basement and standing in front of everybody. And I'm doing this all from movies I've seen. I have never been.
Well, there's all different types of meetings. So there are some meetings where you can just sit and listen. But there's also meetings where you have to go and you have to speak. And so finding which is more comfortable for you absolutely is the way to go. But no, I think I get a lot of calls, and I think that particularly for adolescents, or younger people that haven't been in the recovery community before, or maybe do have some struggles with acknowledging it, that virtual piece, you can be there without being there.
Right. So the resources are there, and for any business listening, our mind, to be a business owner, we work from the neck up. And so we've already talked about this. We've just got to keep our mind fresh and on point. And so anything we can give ourselves that edge, we have to do, because there's a lot of people relying on us, and then we need to rely on our good judgment as well. So
absolutely. Well, and that's, when you talk about the business owner piece, that's one of the things we do also is work with EAPs. So is having contracts with specific EAPs. So the bigger companies often have those. to where they work, so their insurance specifically contracts with different facilities. So it streamlines the process a little bit.
So the takeaway message here, folks, for anybody listening, anybody watching, is there's lots of resources available. You don't have to do this alone. This whole conversation started with a poor gentleman, a gentleman who unfortunately went the wrong path in his life, but he probably doesn't know it, but he spun off a lot of positive. And the fact that we've got Stacey here talking to thousands of us as business owners. And I hope that good comes back to him so that he gets out of the hole he's in right now.
Absolutely. No, and I appreciate the opportunity, Dom. I think this is a conversation that we need to keep having. I think that one of the biggest reasons that it isn't talked about is there's still such an incredible stigma out there, whether it's mental health or addiction, and we need to get over it. There's just so much need to get people the treatment that they need so they can live their life fullest. And I think that if we can just start having a more candid conversation about it, and it will get better.
Yeah. Well, thank you. We're one brick in the wall as I look at bricks in the background.
Yeah, right. There you go.
But it's just another brick in the wall of trying to help this all come together.
Absolutely.
Stacey, thank you. I think this has just been a great episode. I really appreciate it, and I hope that people.
Absolutely. Appreciate the time, and let me know if you have any specific questions that come out, through comments or things, or any future talks you want me to do. Happy to be on. Enjoyed it very much.
Yeah, well, and those of you listening, if you want to have Stacey back on again in the future, shoot me a note about any specific topics or questions you have. Of course, I keep everything confidential. Those of you listening to the podcast know there cannot be that many clients I have whose names are Fred Flintstone and George Jetson. I keep using the same names because confidentiality is important in it's critical in what I do. So I don't use names very much. So that's a takeaway for everybody as well. Stacey, thank you. I won't take any more of your time. I really, really appreciate it. And I think you're doing great work. Thanks for being so nice and helping the world.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tom. I hope you have a great afternoon.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.